At my sister's wedding, I was handed a paper badge that read Limited Access Guest. My mom whispered, "That means no plate." I looked over, walked to the gift table, retrieved my envelope with the $7,500 fund check, and said, "I think you won't need this anymore." My sister ran after me, and my parents shouted, "Come back," but Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all started with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday in April. Brenda's voice came through the line, thin and reedy, like a signal struggling to connect. "Oh, Carolyn. I just don't know how we're going to do it." I could picture her perfectly, sitting at her kitchen table, twisting a napkin in her hands. I settled deeper into my couch, pulling a blanket over my legs. "Do what, Bren? What's wrong?" "The wedding," she sighed, and it was a heavy, dramatic sound. "Everything is just so much more than we thought. The venue, the caterer. Walter's salary is steady, but it only goes so far. And the honeymoon, we were dreaming of Hawaii, you know? A real, proper honeymoon. But it's not going to happen." My heart went out to her. It always did. Ever since we were little girls, I was the quiet, steady one, and she was the whirlwind of drama and dreams. I was the one who saved my allowance, she was the one who spent it all on candy and then looked at me with those big, sad eyes. And I'd always share. "Hey," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's going to be okay. It's your wedding. It should be perfect." "But how?" she whispered. And without even thinking, I said the words that would change everything. "I've got you. Don't worry." That conversation was the spark. For the next 6 months, my life became a series of small, quiet sacrifices. I worked as an administrative manager at a mid-sized logistics company. It was a good job, one I'd earned after years of hard work, and I'd just gotten a small promotion a year earlier. But it wasn't the kind of job where you had thousands of dollars just sitting around. So, I started picking up extra shifts, offering to handle the weekend reports that nobody else wanted. My boss was thrilled. My social life, not so much. My best friend, Susan, called me one Friday night. "Carolyn, we're all going out for dinner and drinks at the Oak Room. You have to come. You've been a ghost for months." I looked at my own dinner, a bowl of leftover chili, and sighed. "I can't, Sue. I'm swamped with this project for work." It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was, a night out at the Oak Room would cost at least $60, and that was $60 that needed to go into the Brenda's Honeymoon Fund, a plain white envelope I kept tucked away in my desk drawer. I canceled my annual trip to the lake with my college friends, a tradition we'd kept for 15 years. I told them something had come up at work. I drove my 10-year-old sedan even when it started making a funny rattling noise, putting off the trip to the mechanic. I even dipped into the small inheritance our grandmother had left me years ago, a fund I'd promised myself I'd only touch for a true emergency, or a down payment on a house. To me, my sister's happiness felt like an emergency. Every 2 weeks, when my paycheck came in, I'd sit at my kitchen table, pay my bills, and then transfer whatever was left, every single dollar, into my savings. I watched the number in that account climb, 1,000, then 3, then 5. When it finally ticked over to $7,500, I felt a wave of pride so powerful it almost brought me to tears. I had done it. I had done something truly meaningful for my sister. A few weeks before the wedding, I went to the bank, got a cashier's check, and sealed it in a simple, elegant card. This was it. This was the proof of my love, a tangible thing she could hold. I couldn't wait to see her face. I imagined her and Walter, sitting on a beach in Hawaii, sipping cocktails, all because of me. The thought made every single sacrifice worth it. Or so I thought. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear. I spent the morning feeling a bubbly mix of excitement and anticipation. I chose my dress carefully, a simple, elegant navy blue dress that I'd bought on sale. I did my hair, put on a little makeup, and felt genuinely happy. This was my big sister's big day. I drove to the church for the ceremony. It was beautiful, of course. Quick, pretty, the kind of thing that's all a blur of white lace and polite applause. Brenda looked radiant, and Walter looked nervous but happy. I managed to catch Brenda's eye for a second as she walked back down the aisle, and I gave her a huge, beaming smile. She sort of nodded in my direction, but she was quickly swept away by the crowd. I chalked it up to nerves. It was her wedding day, after all. I wasn't expecting a red carpet treatment. The real event, the reception, was at a fancy country club about 20 minutes away. I arrived, parked my rattling car between a Lexus and a BMW, and walked toward the grand entrance. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and I could hear the faint sound of music and laughter from inside. As I stepped into the foyer, I saw the check-in table. It was draped in white linen, with two smiling women sitting behind it. I got in line behind a couple who were laughing about something on their phone. When they got to the front, one of the women handed them these beautiful, shiny, envelope-style badges. They were trimmed in gold, with their names and table number, table 8, written in perfect calligraphy. They pinned them on and walked inside, still smiling. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, giving the woman my name. Carolyn Miller. She didn't look up. Her finger slid down a printed list. She stopped, then reached under the table and pulled something out. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't gold-trimmed. It was a flimsy piece of white paper, the kind you'd get at a visitor's desk in an office building, stuck inside a cheap plastic sleeve with a safety pin on the back. Printed on it, in thick, black, block letters, were 3 words, limited access guest. I just stared at it. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Limited access? What did that even mean? I looked at the list on her table, trying to see my name, but she had it angled away from me. I thought, this has to be a mistake. A vendor mix-up. Something. Excuse me, I started to say, my voice sounding weak. I think there might be a mistake. I'm the bride's sister. The woman finally looked up at me, her smile tight and professional. That's the badge I have for you, ma'am. My throat went dry. I stood there, holding this humiliating piece of paper, my mind racing. And then, as if summoned by the sheer force of my confusion, my mother appeared at my elbow. She was dressed to the nines in a shimmering silver gown, her hair perfectly coiffed. She leaned in close, and her perfume, a scent I'd known my whole life, filled my senses. She whispered in my ear, her voice light and conspiratorial, like we were sharing a funny secret. That means no plate. And then she was gone. She just straightened up, gave me a little pat on the arm, and swept into the main hall before I could even form a question. That means no plate. The words echoed in my head. I waited for her to turn around, to wink, to let me in on the joke. But she never looked back. I was left standing there, alone in the foyer, with a cheap paper badge in my hand and my mother's cruel whisper ringing in my ears. The warmth of the day suddenly felt like a bitter chill. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the flimsy plastic badge feeling both heavy and insignificant in my hand. The sounds of the party, the clinking glasses, the swell of music, the waves of laughter, seemed to be coming from a great distance. My first instinct was just to turn around, walk out the door, and drive away. But a stubborn little part of me, the part that had sacrificed for 6 months, refused to believe it. This is a misunderstanding, I told myself. A really, really weird misunderstanding. Mom must have been joking. It was a bad joke, but a joke nonetheless. Clutching that ridiculous badge, I forced my feet to move. I walked into the main hall, my eyes scanning the room, desperately looking for evidence to prove my own theory right. The room was stunning. Huge chandeliers dripped with crystals, casting a golden glow over dozens of round tables draped in white cloths. At the center of each table was an elaborate floral arrangement. Servers were already moving gracefully between the tables, placing dishes in front of seated guests. My heart started to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I made my way to the front of the room where a large, ornate seating chart stood on an easel. It was a beautiful board, with names written in the same elegant gold calligraphy as the other guests' badges. I ran my finger down the alphabetical list, searching for my name. L. M. Miller. There it was. Miller, David. Miller, Patricia. My parents. They were at table 2, the main family table, right next to the head table. But my name, Carolyn Miller, it wasn't there. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Okay. Fine. Maybe I wasn't at the main table. Maybe they put me at another table with cousins or something. I scanned the entire board, my eyes darting from name to name, my breathing getting shallower. Table 3 and 4 and 10, 15, nothing. My name was not listed anywhere. No chair. No plate. Not even a name card tucked away at a forgotten table in the back corner. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even family. I was a placeholder, a loose end they hadn't bothered to snip. The label on my badge suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. Limited access. Access to what? The ceremony, apparently. Access to the gift table. But not access to a meal, to a seat, to a place among the people I was supposed to belong to. I backed away from the seating chart and found a spot near the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, even though no one was looking. I could feel the cheap plastic of my badge against my dress, branding me. I watched as everyone settled in. I saw my sister, Brenda, raise a glass for a toast, her smile dazzling. I saw my parents clapping, their faces beaming with pride. I saw Walter lean in and kiss Brenda's cheek while people snapped photos. They all looked so happy, so perfect, existing in a world where I apparently didn't have a seat at the table. I waited. I stood there against that wall, telling myself that someone, anyone, would notice me. That Brenda would see me, her eyes would widen in horror, and she'd rush over, saying, "Oh my God, Carolyn, there's been a terrible mistake." That my dad would catch my eye and wave me over. That my mom would come back and say, "I was just kidding, you silly goose, come sit down." No one did. They saw me. I know they did. I made eye contact with my mother once. She just gave me a tight little smile and turned back to her conversation. My father glanced my way, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and then looked away. They saw me standing there, dateless, seatless, and alone. And they didn't care. That was the moment the ice in my stomach shattered into a million sharp, painful pieces. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. The realization hit me not like a wave, but like the calm, cold certainty that comes after a storm. All the love, the sacrifice, the months of scrimping and saving, it all felt like a joke. And I was the punchline. I looked at my family, laughing and celebrating at their table, and I felt nothing but a profound, empty silence in my head. There was no screaming, no crying. The hurt was so deep it was quiet. And in that quiet, a single, clear thought emerged: no. You don't get to do this to me. I pushed myself off the wall. My movements felt deliberate, almost robotic. I turned my back on the main hall and walked out into the foyer, back to the entrance where the gift table stood. It had been crowded earlier, but now it was quiet, attended only by a single staff member who was busy organizing gift bags. There were a few scattered envelopes and boxes on the table. I spotted mine immediately. It was a plain white envelope, a little bent at the corner from when I'd placed it down earlier. It was the only one that wasn't sealed with a fancy sticker or a ribbon, just folded closed. It looked as plain and out of place as I felt. I walked over, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The staff member looked up, and I gave her a small, polite smile. "Just forgot to add something to my card," I said smoothly. She nodded and turned back to her task. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt cool against my skin. For a moment, I just held it, the weight of that $7,500 check inside feeling impossibly heavy. It represented 6 months of my life. 6 months of saying no to myself so I could say yes to my sister. And unfortunately for them, I was about to take it back. I opened the flap, slid out the card, and took out the check. I held it between my fingers for a second, then folded it neatly and tucked it into my small purse. I put the empty card back in the envelope and placed it back on the table. Then, I turned. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. But I spoke, my voice not loud, but clear and steady enough to cut through the distant music. "I think you won't need this anymore." I didn't wait for a reaction. I turned and walked toward the exit, my posture straight, my head held high. I didn't make it 10 steps. First, I heard the sound of a chair scraping violently against the floor. Then, someone calling my name, sharp and confused. Then my sister's voice, louder, angrier. "Carolyn! What are you doing?" And then my parents. "Come back! Carolyn, come back here right now." They were all shouting now. A commotion was rising behind me, a wave of shock and anger. But I didn't turn around. I didn't break my stride. I walked calmly out of the grand entrance, into the late afternoon sun. I walked to my car, started the engine, which, of course, made that rattling noise, and drove off without a single glance in the rearview mirror. They could toast and dance all they wanted. But now, the honeymoon in Hawaii they'd been so desperate to afford just got a little less golden. They didn't want me there. Fine. But they wouldn't get to use me either. The quiet girl who always shared her candy was finally done sharing. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was. It was more than that. Every detail of what happened kept replaying in my head in a perfect, painful loop, like a movie burned onto the inside of my eyelids. The flimsy paper badge. My mother's whisper. The empty space on the seating chart. The look on my father's face. Over and over again. I couldn't stop thinking about that white envelope sitting on the gift table, how proud I had been when I dropped it off. I thought I was doing something good, something meaningful. I thought I was part of something. Instead, I was the girl with the paper badge. The girl who didn't get a seat. The girl whose own family decided she didn't quite belong. By morning, the text started. First, "My mom, we need to talk. This has been blown way out of proportion." Then my dad, "Carolyn, please don't make this a thing. Let's not ruin the weekend." And finally, my sister, "Brenda, I can't believe you did that. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stared at my phone, a bitter taste in my mouth. Notice what was missing. Not one of them said, "I'm sorry." Not one of them admitted anything was wrong with what they did. It was all deflection, all sugarcoating, all framed as if my reaction was the problem, not their treatment of me. My mom actually sent a follow-up text that made me want to throw my phone against the wall. "We just assumed you'd be okay with standing since you always say you don't care about fancy stuff." As if I was supposed to be grateful for the privilege of being excluded with a smile. Like I was some kind of enlightened monk who would just float above the humiliation. Around noon, my dad called. I ignored it. He called again, then sent a text. "Come over. We want to talk. Your sister's here, too." I didn't answer right away. I took a long shower, letting the hot water run down my back. I made myself some breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate it slowly at my kitchen table. I cleaned the kitchen. I didn't owe them urgency. I didn't owe them the benefit of the doubt anymore. But still, part of me wanted to go. Not to fix anything. Just to watch them squirm a little. They needed that check. I knew it. So, I went. When I pulled into the driveway, Brenda's car was already there. I walked in without knocking. All three of them were in the living room, arranged like a jury. My mom tried to look casual, smiling like I was just back from a long vacation. My dad nodded, his expression serious, like this was going to be a reasonable business conversation. Brenda stood with her arms crossed, refusing to look at me. I sat down in the armchair opposite them and didn't say a word. I just waited. My dad spoke first, clearing his throat. Well, he began, it was really unfortunate how things went yesterday. Not that they made it unfortunate. Just that it happened to be unfortunate. My mom followed with some lines about miscommunication and logistics. She used the word oversight 3 times, as if I had just slipped through the cracks of a spreadsheet error. Brenda finally spoke, her voice sharp. I still can't believe you walked out and took your gift back. What were you thinking? I listened to it all, nodding occasionally. When they had finished their pathetic damage control, I looked at them, one by one. Then I said one thing. I might change my mind. That was it. No promises, no apologies, no explanations. Just that one little word, might. The shift in the room was instant and palpable. My mom sat up straighter, her eyes wide like I'd just thrown her a life preserver. My dad let out a sharp little exhale, the tension visibly leaving his shoulders. Even Brenda uncrossed her arms and finally looked directly at me. I could feel their hope, thick and cloying in the air. They thought they'd won. My mom started talking fast. Oh, Carolyn, that would be so generous. That money would go directly to the honeymoon, you know that. We don't want this little thing to hang over us forever. My dad chimed in about how families have rough moments, but they get through them. Brenda didn't say thank you. Not even then. I just smiled a little, stood up, and said, I need some time to think. I walked out, leaving them with that word, might, buzzing in their ears like a secret promise. Let them sit with that. Let them stew in it. Because for the first time in a very long time, they wanted something from me. And I was going to let them feel what it's like to hope someone else gives you what you desperately need, and doesn't. The next few days were a masterclass in manipulation. My mom left a voicemail, her voice soft and careful, like she was speaking to someone on a ledge. She said she'd been thinking all night, that perhaps things had been handled a little too rigidly, that perhaps they could have communicated better. But still, no, I'm sorry. Just an attempt to paint the whole thing as a minor misunderstanding that I had blown out of proportion. Then came the kicker, they were delaying the honeymoon. Not canceling, just pushing it back a bit. She said it like it was a weather delay, a bit of mild turbulence. What she didn't say was the part one already knew, without my check, they were screwed. My dad tried a different tactic. He called and played the flattery card. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Carolyn, he said, his voice smooth. Successful, stable, dependable. You should be proud of yourself for having something to offer. Then he got to the point. We trust your judgment. I know you'll make the right call. The message was clear, you're the responsible one, so be responsible and give us the money. That was the moment I remembered the car. About 6 months earlier, my dad's old station wagon had finally given up the ghost. I had a second car, an older but reliable sedan that I mostly used for weekend errands. They asked if they could borrow it for a week or two while they sorted things out. A week turned into a month, then 2. Every time I asked about it, my dad had an excuse. They were waiting for a part. The mechanic was busy. The mechanic didn't show up. After a while, I just stopped asking. It became another one of those things I'd just done for the family. Another quiet sacrifice. But the car was still in my name. Still on my insurance. I hung up the phone with my dad, walked over to my laptop, and logged into my insurance account. Yep. Still registered to me. An idea, cold and clear, formed in my mind. Actions speak louder than words, right? Well, my family was about to hear me loud and clear. I looked up local towing companies. I found one with good reviews and called them. Hi, I said, my voice perfectly steady. I need to schedule a vehicle recovery. I'm the registered owner. I gave the operator my parents' address. She asked if the keys would be available. No, I replied. It will need to be towed. No problem, she said. We can have a truck there Friday morning at 9. Perfect, I said, and gave her my credit card information. No warning. No courtesy heads up. Just a scheduled tow for Friday at 9:12 a.m. I spent the next 2 days in a state of calm anticipation. Friday morning came. I made myself coffee and sat by the window, my phone on the table in front of me. At 9:15 a.m., it rang. It was my mom. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I let it go again. A third time. Finally, I picked up. Hello? I said, my voice neutral. Carolyn, she shrieked, her voice panicked. There's someone outside. There's a tow truck in the driveway. They're hooking up the car. Did you do this? Yes, I said simply. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my dad yelling something in the background, probably at the tow truck driver. Why? She finally asked, her voice a strained whisper. Why would you do that? I'm changing insurance companies, I said, which wasn't a lie. I had been meaning to for months. It's just easier to have the vehicle at my own place while I sort out the paperwork. But we need the car, she sputtered. We have plans. This is so inconvenient. I could hear my dad now, his voice getting louder and angrier in the background. Tell him to get his hands off my car, he roared, forgetting, apparently, that it wasn't his car at all. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Then maybe you should borrow one, I said, my voice cool. Or rent one. Or figure something out. That's what I'd have to do, right? There was another pause. Then, my mother's voice dropped, full of accusation. This is about the wedding, isn't it? No, Mom, I said, and for the first time, I felt like I was speaking the complete, unvarnished truth. This is about patterns. And I hung up. The silence after I hung up on my mother was profound. For the rest of the day, I expected a flood of angry calls or texts. Nothing. It was an eerie, unsettling quiet. They were probably panicking, trying to figure out their next move now that one of their essential resources, my car, had been taken away. It felt like I had finally, after all these years, changed the rules of the game, and they didn't know how to play anymore. That evening, I was curled up on the couch, trying to watch a movie but mostly just staring at the wall, when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was one of my parents trying a new tactic. But something made me look. The message read, "Hey Carolyn, this is Walter. Brenda's fiancé. I hope this isn't out of line." My heart skipped a beat. Walter? Why was he messaging me? Another message popped up before I could reply. I don't know everything that happened at the reception, but I saw what they did with the seating and the badge. I just want you to know I'm really, truly sorry. You didn't deserve that. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. It was the first apology I had received from anyone. And it came from the person I least expected. Walter had always been quiet, a bit shy, usually overshadowed by Brenda's big personality. I never really knew what he thought about anything. To know that he had seen what happened and that he thought it was wrong felt validating. It was like a single, steady light in a dark room. I took a moment before I typed back. Thank you for saying that, Walter. I really appreciate it. His reply was almost instant. I just wish you'd stayed. I think everything would have played out differently if you'd been there longer. I didn't agree with that part. I knew that staying would have just meant enduring more humiliation in silence. But I didn't argue. I wasn't going to dump my bitterness on the one person in this whole mess who seemed to have a working moral compass. I just sent back a simple, "It means a lot that you reached out." That small exchange changed something in me. It broke through the feeling of complete isolation. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't overreacted. What they did was wrong, and someone else saw it too. It was a small thing, a few lines of text on a screen, but it felt like being handed a shield. It strengthened my resolve. It made me feel less like a lone soldier and more like someone who was, justifiably, defending her own ground. The quiet from my parents and sister continued, but now, it felt less like a punishment and more like the silence of cowards. And I knew, with more certainty than ever, that I was done letting them get away with it. A few days after the car was towed, I decided it was time to stop waiting for them to make a move. I was going to make one of my own. I drove over to my parents' house unannounced. I parked across the street and walked in through the front door without knocking. My dad was in the living room watching the news. He flinched when he saw me, a deer caught in headlights. My mom walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her face a mask of rehearsed nonchalance. "Carolyn, I didn't know you were coming," she said. "I know," I replied, sitting down at the kitchen table. They didn't offer me coffee, which was a first. The air was thick with unspoken tension. My dad muted the TV and leaned forward, gearing up for a pitch. "Listen, honey," he started, "we've talked to Brenda. She's just so upset about everything. She never intended for you to feel excluded. The wedding was just so stressful, you know? So many decisions." My mom added that they'd been looking at alternative honeymoon options. "Something smaller," she said, her voice dripping with martyrdom. "More local." I let them talk, their weak excuses washing over me. When they were done, I nodded slowly. Then I looked them both in the eye. "I might be able to help," I said. The relief on their faces was immediate and sickeningly transparent. "But," I continued, letting the word hang in the air, "I was thinking maybe I'd put it in the form of a loan." The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. What kind of terms?" my dad asked, his voice strained. "Monthly repayments with interest," I said calmly. "Nothing crazy. But it's a lot of money. I think it's fair. We'd need a formal contract, something a lawyer could draft up to make sure we're all protected." They both looked like I'd just started speaking in another language. My mom's face crumpled. "But it was a gift, wasn't it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. And that's when I let the cool, hard anger I'd been holding back finally surface. "It was going to be," I said, my voice low and steady. "Then you downgraded me to a limited access guest and cut me out of my own sister's wedding like I was some distant cousin you barely knew. Gifts are for people you love and respect. Loans are for business arrangements. And right now, this feels a lot more like business." I stood up. "Think about it," I said, walking toward the door. "Let me know what you decide." I didn't get halfway down the driveway before Brenda's car pulled in, screeching to a halt. She jumped out, her face flushed. She must have been on her way over. "Wait, Carolyn, wait," she called out, rushing toward me. I stopped and turned. She looked tired. Not fake tired. Genuinely worn out. And for a weird second, it threw me. "I know they screwed up," she said, her voice breathless. I know I did, too. But you've made your point, okay? Just, don't keep doing this. Just give us the gift. I meant it when I said I needed it. I looked at her, at the sister I had adored my whole life. The sister I had sacrificed for. I meant the gift, too, I said quietly. Every single dollar of it. She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. She thought I was caving. But then I just got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the driveway with my parents, the three of them finally united in their stunned confusion. They wanted my money, but they were going to have to play by my rules. The ball was in my court, and for the first time, I was the one deciding the game. The days that followed were a strange, silent war. My parents and Brenda didn't respond to my loan offer. I figured they were hoping I'd get lonely or guilty and just give in. They'd spent a lifetime teaching me that keeping the peace was my job, usually at my own expense. They were waiting for me to fall back into my old role. But something inside me had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't that person anymore. Then, one random Thursday night, everything cracked wide open. I was half asleep on the couch, watching some mindless sitcom, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but the first line of the text made me sit bolt upright. Hey, I hope this isn't too weird, but I really need to tell you something. It's about the wedding and your sister. My heart started pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I kept reading. This is Diane, Walter's cousin. I helped them with some of the wedding organization. Seating charts, RSVP stuff, all of it. I saw the original guest list. My breath caught in my throat. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever came next was going to be the final nail in the coffin. A second message followed. You are listed as family, full access, seated at table 2 with your parents and Brenda. 3 days before the wedding, your mom emailed a revised list. You were the only name that was moved. Brenda approved it. I didn't move. I just sat there on my couch in the dark, the only light coming from the glowing screen of my phone. I read the words again. And again. Brenda approved it. This wasn't some mistake my parents made that Brenda was too stressed or too weak to fight. This wasn't an oversight. This was a calculated decision, a precise and deliberate act. My own sister had seen my name on that list, next to hers, and she had signed off on having me demoted, cut out, and humiliated. And they did it knowing exactly what I was bringing to the table. Literally. I had told Brenda weeks earlier that I had something big planned for the wedding gift, something that would take the pressure off her back. She was the one who had cried to me about their budget. I had offered to help, and she had let me. She took my promise of help, and then, 3 days before her wedding, she approved the plan to treat me like a stranger. They wanted the money, but not the connection. They wanted my generosity, but not my presence. They didn't want me in the pictures, in the speeches, at the table. They just wanted the envelope. And that's when it stopped hurting. In that one, awful, clarifying moment, the pain vanished, and something else took its place. It was a cold, hard, and strangely peaceful certainty. I finally knew exactly who they were. And I had proof. No more wondering. No more second-guessing my own feelings. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. One more message from Diane came through. I'm not trying to stir up drama. I just couldn't sit on it anymore. What they did wasn't okay. I'm really sorry. I stared at the screen. She had already given me the one thing my family never would, the truth. The feeling in that moment, it wasn't sadness anymore. It was a cold, clear understanding. They didn't just make a mistake. They made a choice. They chose the money over me. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can possibly know. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen to what I did next. The next morning, I woke up calm. There was no emotional spiral, no urge to scream or cry. There was just a quiet, steady acceptance. They chose this. My mother chose to exclude me. My dad chose to support her. And Brenda, she chose to let it happen. She approved it. So, I started cleaning house. It wasn't an act of anger. It felt more like a necessary, long overdue tidying up of my own life. I opened up my phone. I found the family group chat, the one that was always filled with my mom's cheerful emojis and my dad's bad jokes. I scrolled to the bottom, found the button that said Leave Conversation, and pressed it without a single word. 1 minute I was there, the next I was gone. Then, I went to my contacts. I found Mom. I blocked her number. I blocked her on every social media platform. No more seeing her curated posts about her wonderful family. I did the same for my dad. Then I got to Brenda. My finger hovered over the block button. But I stopped. I didn't block her. Not yet. I just muted her conversation. Silenced it. I wasn't trying to punish them in a way they could see. I was removing myself from the space where they had built a version of me that only existed for their benefit, the dependable, ATM sister Carolyn. That version of me was gone. Later that day, I got another text from Walter's fiancé, Brenda's husband. I meant Walter. I don't know what happened, he wrote, but Brenda's been quiet all morning. I think she's realizing things. I read his message and felt a brief pang of sympathy for him, a good man caught in a messy family. But I didn't respond. Let her sit in it. Let her realize things on her own. I wasn't going to carry that weight for her anymore. 2 days later, my dad tried to get through my firewall. He sent a message from his work email, a short, pathetic attempt to smooth things over. It read, "Family is complicated. We all make mistakes. We love you." I stared at it. No apology. Just a vague lifeline wrapped in excuses. The old me, the peacekeeper, would have grabbed onto it. She would have used it as an excuse to let everything slide, just to have things go back to normal. But the new me knew their normal was my misery. I dragged the email to the trash folder without a reply. I went to my computer, found the file on my desktop labeled loan terms, and I deleted it. They weren't getting the money as a loan. They weren't getting it as a gift. They weren't getting anything. That door was now closed, locked, and bolted. The silence that followed felt different. It wasn't the tense, waiting silence from before. It was a clean, empty space. A space that was finally mine. Then, on a random Tuesday evening, Brenda's name popped up on my phone. She was calling. My thumb hovered over the green button. For a heart-stopping second, the little girl inside me, the one who adored her big sister, wanted to answer. But I didn't. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was short. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Carolyn, I really need to talk to you. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway." I listened to it once. Then I set my phone down, put on my sneakers, and went for a long walk. No music, no distractions, just the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement and the quiet evening breeze. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months. I was finally breathing my own air. My birthday was coming up in a couple of weeks. For years, my mom had always made a big deal out of it, insisting on a family dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant. I had even, foolishly, made a reservation weeks ago, holding on to a sliver of hope that they might somehow pull their heads out of the sand. That hope was gone now. The day after Brenda's call, I canceled the reservation. There would be no family dinner. A few days before my birthday, a letter arrived in the mail. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, and I recognized my mother's careful, looping handwriting immediately. There was no return address. I opened it. The letter was 2 pages long. She wrote about how much she missed me, how family wasn't the same without me, how mistakes were made and maybe things got out of hand. She said they never, ever meant to hurt me like that. But still, through all the beautifully crafted sentences, the apology was missing. There was no ownership, no I was wrong. It was just a gentle rewriting of history, a version where they were loving but overwhelmed, where I was sensitive but strong, and where this whole ugly affair could be chalked up to a simple misunderstanding. I folded the letter once, then twice, tucked it back in the envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Let it sit there. Let it age into irrelevance. On the night of my birthday, I ordered takeout from that same Italian restaurant. I lit a single candle on a slice of tiramisu I'd bought for myself. As I sat alone on my small porch with a glass of wine, I whispered one word before blowing out the candle. Freedom. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just freedom. The freedom from pretending they would ever change. The next morning, on my actual birthday, I woke up to no calls, no texts, no fake cheer. It was exactly what I needed. I made myself pancakes. I played music too loud. I danced barefoot in my kitchen like nobody had ever handed me a paper badge that said I didn't belong. Because I did belong. Just not there. Not with them. That weekend, I finally booked the trip. I didn't go far. Just a 3-day trip to a small coastal town I'd never been to. I packed light, a carry-on, a journal, and a couple of comfortable sweaters. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. When I arrived, I turned off my phone. For 3 days, there was no social media, no emails, no family drama. Just the sound of the ocean waves, the smell of salt in the air, and the quiet that comes from finally, truly being alone. But not lonely. I woke up early each morning to watch the sunrise, a cup of hot coffee warming my hands. I walked for hours along the beach, letting the cold water chase my bare feet. I sat in a small cafe and wrote pages and pages in my journal. But I wasn't writing about them. I was writing about me. About who I used to be, and who I was becoming. About how for so long, I'd measured my own worth in their approval, and how little that was worth in the end. On the last night of the trip, I walked along the shore as the sun went down, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I laughed out loud, a real, uninhibited laugh, and no one was there to judge it or quiet it. I felt light. I felt like myself again. When I got home, the silence was still there. But it felt different now. It felt like a choice I had made, not a punishment I had to endure. The peace I had found by the ocean had followed me home. A few days later, I found another envelope in my mailbox. This one was from Brenda. It wasn't my mother's elegant stationery. It was just a plain white envelope. Inside, there was a folded note and a printed photograph. The photo was from our childhood, taken at a summer barbecue in our backyard. We were maybe 8 and 10. I had chocolate ice cream smeared all over my face, and Brenda was laughing, her arm around my shoulder, reaching out to wipe it off with her sleeve. We both looked so happy, so whole. Before all the complications, before they learned how to make me feel small. I unfolded the note. Her handwriting was messy, rushed. Carolyn, it began. I messed up. I know I did. I didn't stop it when I should have. I was scared of making things worse, and instead I let them get worse. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I looked at her words. I'm sorry. The 2 words my mother couldn't bring herself to write. I put the photo and the note back in the envelope. I didn't rip them up. I didn't throw them away. I walked over to my desk and slid them into the bottom drawer, right next to my mother's letter. I didn't call her. Healing doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes, it just means locking it gently and walking away without slamming it. That night, I got one more text from Walter. I hope someday this changes, he wrote. But if it doesn't, I still think you did the right thing. I've learned more from watching you walk away than I ever did from watching them pretend. I replied, thank you. That means everything. And it did. A few days later, I opened a new document on my laptop. I typed a title at the top, What I Will and Will Not Accept. It was a list. A manifesto for my own life. It started with, I will not accept exclusion masked as tradition. And it ended with, I will protect my peace like it's gold, because it is. And anyone who wants to be in my life has to treat it like treasure, not a tool. I printed it out and taped it to the inside of my closet door. Not for them to see. But for me. A reminder that they might never change, but I already had. They didn't lose a daughter or a sister that day at the wedding. They lost access. Access to my generosity, to my support, to my loyalty. I still have all of those things. I'm just giving them to people who treat me like I belong at the table. And the best part is, I have my own seat now. At a table I built myself. Where I serve my own joy in portions big enough for me to finally feel full. And when I raise my glass, it's not to a family who failed me. It's to the girl who finally said enough, and meant it. To Carolyn. To me. To freedom. As the story closes, we are left with a profound reminder that self-worth is not determined by others, but by the boundaries we set and the respect we demand for ourselves. Carolyn's journey teaches us the importance of standing firm when faced with betrayal, even if it comes from those closest to us. Her strength in reclaiming her voice and walking away from an environment that failed to honor her value is a testament to the power of self-respect and resilience. This story also highlights the delicate balance between forgiveness and self-preservation. While forgiveness may heal wounds, it doesn't always mean reopening doors that were closed for good reason. Carolyn's choice to protect her peace rather than endure further hurt is a lesson in prioritizing one's emotional well-being over the expectations of others. It takes courage to step away, but sometimes, it's the only path to true freedom. What does this story mean to you? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your peace? Share your thoughts below or drop a good in the comments if this reflection resonates with you.